Yes, it's great to have you. I see you from Mali. Thank you so much for joining, for being on time. Olaolu Akike, thank you so much. And Mabel, our presenter, is here already. Thank you so much. Yes, so it's 6 p.m. West African time, and we are going to be starting right on time. And we hope that others will be joining us in this webinar. And I'm very delighted because our guest for tonight is here with us. And before I hand over to her, I'll quickly like to read her bio. Mrs. Mabel Okereafor is a registered developmental psychologist and the clinical director at Nurture Child Development Clinic in Lagos. With extensive certifications, including HANEN licensed early communication professional, certified early start Denver model, ESDM therapist, and qualified behavior analyst. She specializes in the assessment, diagnosis, and evidence-based early intervention for children with autism and related disorders. Mrs. Okereafor's passion lies in improving the lives of children with developmental disorders by providing access to gold standard programs and support. She is married and has 4 amazing children. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to introduce to you tonight our guests, our very special guest for our EDU-P March webinar, Mrs. Mabel Okereafor. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for having me, Ms. Epson. It's a privilege to be here this evening, and quite an interesting topic. I want to appreciate everyone that has turned up. It's festive seasons, and it's very common for people to be really busy trying to get their chicken, their turkey, and their rice. Yeah. Thank you for making out the time to join us for this enlightenment, because for me, I believe whatever support we're talking about with regards to children with learning differences begins with how much knowledge we have as a community and as a people. The more we know about children with learning differences, the better equipped that we are to support them. So welcome everybody, and thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Very much excited to have you here. Okay, so very quickly, we are talking about handling children with special education needs. Yes, both as parents and as educators. So I know you have numerous years of experiences in handling such children and in working with parents and working with schools as well. And I know you also have your own organization that work with children directly that have the special education needs. So I would like to hear from you, probably share a story with us about cases that you have handled or any personal experience working with children with special education needs. Thank you, ma'am.
I don't even know where to start because there are just too many stories, too many stories. But let me start from an early interventionist perspective and from my own personal story. I like telling my story because, yeah, Sun is a very interesting topic. So I think for me, beyond what you would classically categorize as special educational needs is also the fact that there are some children out there that might not necessarily fall into that bracket, but who could need support. For instance, I know that my first daughter and my son, they had difficulties in terms of developing language skills when they were quite young. And because I'm a practitioner and I'm in this field, I was able to identify it on time. And we went into work in terms of providing more stimulation. And that sort of opened my eyes to all the support systems that we take for granted. The systems of having an enriched environment. You know, if you do EYFS, there's something you people would call the prepared environment. right? So similarly, even in a home, there's something called an enriched environment that sort of supports children's development as they grow through that first 5 years of life, and then sets the foundation for whatever skills that the children are going to learn as they go on. So for me, being able to understand what milestones were and tracking those milestones for those two children of mine sort of helps me to recognize on time when some things were not going like they should go, and also be able to act for them. So that's from an early intervention perspective. And just to say that sometimes some children would not necessarily fall into that category that you would classify as SEN. Okay, yet they would need support. They will need a little push to get started in terms of their milestones. And then when it comes to SEN itself, generally, early intervention is key. Early intervention is very crucial. Being able to put support systems in place to first and foremost identify when a child is at risk or when a child is experiencing a delay is very crucial to whatever progress that child is going to meet. And I, for one, have seen that happen a lot of times. So when we say the first 5 years of a child's life are very crucial, it means that is when so many things can happen. We must have heard about the plasticity of the brain, that the brain is very elastic. Trust me, all of those plasticity happens within that first 5 years. So when we're able to identify on time and put some support system or provide referral for that child to get support, a lot of things can happen. And I always tell parents when they come to me, I said, most of the success stories that we have had as an organization have stemmed from the fact that some children were picked up on time when they were 18 months, when they were 24 months, when they were 3 years, and then the parents were able to take action. For us, we've seen a lot of progress, and parents are overwhelmed. They are wondering, so the children with special educational needs go to school? I tell them, I have geniuses.
Yeah.
Reading geniuses, children that are very hyperlexic. You didn't need to teach them your phonic sounds and everything. They're reading big, big words. So that's how interesting this industry and this field of special educational needs is. I've seen children who have made tremendous progress. I've seen children who have moved from being on the moderate severity level to mild, and sometimes even exceeding the symptom classification for certain kinds of presentation. So for me, it's very key that children access early intervention on time. A case in point, so I had a child that came in from, the parents are in Canada, they were based in Canada. And when they discovered that he had some communication delay, he wasn't communicating as he should communicate. And what was the issue? So he had a few words, but in social situations, he would not communicate. And then if you've spoken to families that have jackpot, that's another thing. If you've spoken to the jackpot families, they'll tell you that to access service is a tough one. So for this family, what they just did was to ship the child back to grandma in Lagos. That was sometime, I think that was around April last year. And he came in and got enrolled in the program. And as I speak to you, we just had a send forth for him yesterday. So much progress. His mom was just so excited, so happy, and so grateful that she took that decision that she had to take, like sending him down to grandma's place and having him access intervention. So that child has moved, not just for the fact that he's more communicative now, but he's doing well even in school. By the time he gets to Canada, where children start school at the age of 5, 6, he's well ahead of his peers. So that just tells us about the strength of early identification and intervention for children with learning differences.
Yeah, thank you so very much, ma'am. Thank you. Wow, this is amazing. And thank you for taking us through that background and telling us about some of the experiences that you have had with children with special needs. Now, I'd like to ask a question for parents who have this children with such challenges. What are the first signs? Because some parents do not even know how to tell if your child is having a challenge. No, so we still have parents who are in denial. We still have some who are feeling, I'm not sure it is, they are not really able to place it. So what are those signs? What can parents look out for to tell if their children might be under the spectrum? Thank you.
So one would say, I like the fact that you said a spectrum. So we have different presentations, and of course you could have mild, you could have moderate, you could have severe. How do I know as a parent that something is not right with my child? Like they will say in Sounds of Music, let's start from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So we start from the very beginning. You want to understand what your pregnancy history has been as a mother. Were you overly stressed? Did you have issues? Did you bleed? If there was bleeding, if there was threatened miscarriage, that tells you that you need to be at alert when your child comes to be able to monitor, right? And then when you go through the delivery process also, that's another stage where you need to be observant as a parent. What was the delivery process like? How prolonged was labor? Right? Because some of the things that you now see in the later years of the child has disabilities and disorders, sometimes they happen during the birth process. Sometimes a woman goes for antenatal clinic and the doctor is saying, oh, because of cervical pelvic, there's a terminology for it, more like you might not be able to push your baby through the natural birth process and you couldn't be recommended for a cesarean. For some people, they run away from that. They say, oh, they want to deliver like a Hebrew woman. And sometimes they say, oh, your baby is breached or the umbilical cord is around the child's neck. Those are risk factors. So as a woman, when you have all of these risk factors, you're already on the lookout to see, okay, how is my child doing? And when you get into that labor room, the water has broken since 2 days ago. Now, the amniotic fluid is something that is supposed to protect your child while your child is in the womb. Once the water breaks, it means that child may be susceptible to infection. Infection could also lead to some of the things that you see. So if you have such what we call a significant history as a woman during that delivery process, or you had prolonged labor, you had to push 20 hours, 24 hours, you still delivery, and then the baby comes out. The baby is all pale. The baby did not cry at birth. Sometimes they're having to shake the baby vigorously. And in other instances, they're telling you your child has to receive oxygen, means that baby was already asphyxiated. So those things are indicators that this child may have issues. So I'm looking at the risk factors, even the before we even go on to say, okay, these are the causes would have an issue, right? And then sometimes you have children that are born prematurely, very low birth weights. So when we talk about very low birth weight, we're talking about children that are not up to 2 kg or 2 kg and below. It means that child may be at risk, right? So when we have all of these things going on, it means you really need to be on the lookout, because if you're on the lookout, then you can pick it on time. Then the next thing is after delivery, you're looking out for your milestones, what we call developmental milestones. Milestones that are physical, milestones that are social, milestones that cognitive. In terms of physical milestones, what we know as people, that's common. Does the baby have neck control? Right? These are children that maybe they don't have any physical presentations in terms of, oh, this child has a disability. So some disabilities are quite physical. If a child has Down syndrome, if a child has something like autism, or just physically looking at a child. So you're looking out for their milestones, no neck control, difficulty with sitting, delay in working, and then the child is not speaking when they are supposed to be speaking. Those are already red flags telling you that something is going on with my child. And then for children that have social, emotional, behavioral issues, you could find that your child is not interacting. The child is not trying to play with other children. And sometimes when the child has language, the child is speaking more to themselves than communicating with you. So it's common to see children that have speech. Now, there's a difference between speech and communication. Speech in the sense that the child is producing words, but the child is not being intentional in passing across information. So we'll see children that read nursery rhymes, read the alphabet, but they cannot tell you that they want to drink water. Rather, they will throw a tantrum, they will hit their head, they will scratch and all of those things. That tells you that that child is not where they're supposed to be and needs to be looked at by a developmental pediatrician, a developmental psychologist, a child development specialist that has expertise in that area. So when we see all of these things pulled together, they tell us that this child might need support. In some other cases, you could have, maybe not all of this, you could have a child that is beginning to make progress and then there's a sudden regression of skills.
Yeah.
Okay, a child that used to smile, used to play, stops doing that. A child that was saying mommy, dada, and all of those things, those words, rather than going forward, are disappearing, right? That tells you that this child has an issue. Those are some issues with developmental disorders. And then when it comes to those invisible ones that have to do with learning, okay, sometimes when you talk about dyslexia and all of those things, there are pre-indicators when the child is young, because sometimes these children would have difficulty in gaining language skills. The child did not talk until they were 3, 4 years old. Then in the school, as teachers, you will discover that, oh, while everyone else is picking the phonic sound, this particular child is very, very slow in picking up those phonological sounds. So that already tells you that there's some degree of delay going on. And yes, as a mother, I understand how overwhelming it can be to think for a moment that something is wrong with your child. So sometimes that's where the whole denial stuff comes from. Like I always tell people, so I happen to have had the opportunity to have raised 2 children with febrile seizures, meaning when they have high temperatures, they would have seizures until they turn 5. So I know the kind of anxiety, the concerns, the fears that parents could have, because you expect your child to be okay and all of that. And so sometimes it's common to stay in denial and try to refuse this reality that does not align with what you expect for your child. That is understandable, but we should be able to, for the sake of the progress we want to see in the child, move past that and be able to take a step forward to find out if for real something is going on and what we can begin to do to help the child.
Yes, thank you so very much. I really, really appreciate all these explanations, because you mentioned something that most people do not really know about such, because I have experienced that as a class teacher. I had a girl in my class, and she's a special needs child, and the mother was so concerned. In fact, at the point she was in denial, because she told me this girl has always been on point from when I gave birth to her. She started talking, she started doing everything. All of a sudden, she just stopped talking. She just stopped all those movements. Everything was just slowing down. So she strongly believed that there could be some spiritual forces, or maybe there is an inheritance from one side of the family. So she said she has done a lot of prayers and fasting, because this girl has been so normal. No, so but you have just educated us that it doesn't have to be slow from birth. A child can actually be born and be picking up all the milestones and pick up everything so fast. Then they can also be a gradual retrogression. It's also part of the signs. And thank you so much for that. I believe that parents and teachers who are here are really gaining a lot. Now I want to go to the area of teachers now. Sometimes in schools we have special needs children enrolled, and a teacher has to take care or has to nurture and teach those children. And it takes a lot of empathy and a lot of patience to work with such children. So what would be your advice for those teachers, and how would you suggest that a teacher should properly handle children with special educational needs in the school system? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for that question. So when it comes to providing support for children with learning differences in school, it starts first and foremost with self-reflection, really. What are your thoughts? What are your, what's your mindset towards children with learning differences? That would change a lot of things. If, for instance, you're caught up in a lot of stereotypes about what a child with special needs should look like, should act like, should be able to learn, you might not be able to help that child. Okay, there's something we call the person first language, and it's also the person first mindset. The child first mindset, whatever the presentation of the child that you've heard of, try to meet the child before you meet the disorder or disability. Because no matter how many children with special needs or disabilities or disorders that you have seen, you've seen just that number. Every child is different, even within the same presentation. If you meet two children with cerebral palsy, they have different skill sets. If you meet three children with Down syndrome, they have different skill sets. So you first and foremost need to own up to that fact that you want to see the child first before their disorder. That's the first thing. Disabuse your mind, erase those stereotypes that you might have, right, about children with learning difficulties. And then the next thing is knowledge. You cannot support what you don't understand. Mm-hmm. You cannot. Do you understand? So as teachers, it's important that we take out time to understand what are the different kinds of presentation that you could have with children with special needs. What would you expect to see in a child with autism spectrum disorder? What should you expect from a child with Down syndrome, a child with dyslexia? Because these are all different presentations, and the kinds of support that they would need will be different. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? So if I have an understanding and background knowledge about how hyperactive, for instance, a child with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder would be, I would know how to structure my class. I would know how to plan to support the child. I would know, for instance, where to sit the child, such that to a large extent, some of the concerns I may have in class have been taken care of. If I also have an understanding that children with autism spectrum disorder would have sensory processing difficulties, I would know why when there's a lot of noise, my child with autism spectrum disorder would scream out of the blues because there's an overload. Do you understand? But if I don't have this background knowledge, it becomes difficult and makes my work even more compounded. You get? So the first thing is disbias your mind. The second thing, you need to get information. Take time to study, because the truth of the matter is, with special needs, you don't plan to have them in your class. They just show up. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So just like parents don't just plan to have a child. Sometimes parents don't plan to have a child with special needs, but they happen. Mm-hmm. Right? So there are some schools, the child has been with you from crèche, playgroup. Now they're in nursery, in your class. Nobody planned for them to have that sort of atypicality, but they are there. So just take time to understand the different presentations. What does it look like? And sometimes you could also take time to go and volunteer in specialist centers, because what you read in the textbook is very different from the realities. Go and volunteer, go and get experiential knowledge, and also try to get some training that equips you to succeed with that child. Because there's something that I've seen in working with schools. Sometimes teachers just disengage totally from the process. Like that child is not part of their class. They're not interested in how the child is progressing. They're not as little as even making requisition for the books that the parents have paid for that child. They don't bother. Do you understand? So I want to encourage us as teachers to be more involved, to see the child as a valid member of your class and be an advocate for that child. It begins with knowledge empowerment. Do you understand? So the other thing you want to do as a teacher is to understand, because they are children with special educational needs, they would require special support, beginning with the instruction. There has to be differentiation. there has to be, even before we begin to differentiate, first and foremost, there has to be a plan that itemizes what this child is going to learn, what you would call an individualized educational plan for that child. It has to be there. So we're not just saying, oh, today we think he should learn this or she should learn this. And no, we have a plan. Do you understand? So for Doris, we want Doris for the numbers. Everybody is doing 1 to 1,000. We would like to start. We're not saying that's all Doris would learn. We want to start with 1 to 20. When Doris masters 1 to 20, it's clear what the next step is. Do you get it? So there has to be that plan. So when we do the plan, how are we going to teach Doris the plan? We have to be able to differentiate. Right? Do we want to go concrete? Do we want to go, how do we want to teach Doris? Right? So if everybody is going to do it on their notebooks, what would be best to teach Doris? If Doris has physical needs, how is Doris going to tell me what she knows? That's differentiation. How am I going to access Doris's knowledge? Can she speak to me her answers and I'll record them? Because the fact that the child has motor impairments does not mean the child has cognitive impairments as well. Because I've also seen scenarios where they say, oh, because the child cannot write, but this child can recite the alphabet. You say, oh, because the child cannot write. So differentiation has to come in terms of how the child is going to receive instruction and how the child is going to give out the knowledge, like express what they have learned. We have to be able to differentiate. And then the last thing when it comes to supporting a child, not the last, maybe second to the last, is the fact that progress monitoring is key. Let's not continue that sort of injustice. Sorry, I see it as an injustice where there's really no tracking. So you ask the teacher, so where's Doris right now? And they don't know. They say, wait for the therapist is coming. You should know. Exactly. Because that child is your primary responsibility even before the therapist. The child is your primary responsibility. You are the class teacher. You are the one that is the guardian of the curriculum, the instruction. You're the one that knows what the expectation for the class is. So even if the therapist is going to be supporting and doing anything, you should know what they are doing and be sure that they are doing it right and they have all the resources to do it. So you understand? So there has to be progress monitoring. It doesn't make sense for us to have a child in the same class for 3 years running. So we should be able to track, okay, so we did an IEP. By the end of the year, by the end of the session, how much of the curriculum did this child access? So even if we're going to transition the child to another class, if I'm taking, for instance, the child from grade 1 to grade 2, where did the child stop in grade 1? I should be able to account for it. So this child in math, this child is in first term topic or topic whatever. Do you understand? In literacy, this child is in second term. These are the topics. So if we are able to cover those gaps, you would see that the child will make progress. Then when we don't put all of this tracking in place, then we lose it all. Then the final thing I want to plead and ask for educators, collaborate. You see those paraprofessionals, the therapists that comes to the class, they are not trying to take your job. So don't dash them the child. They're there to, they're there to help you work. So please walk with them, ask them questions. So it's not a function of, oh, if the therapist is not here, the child can't do anything. The therapist is a human being like you and just got some training. What can I do? Ask questions. And sometimes you might just be able to protect the child from unprofessional therapists. We've seen cases of abuse and all of that because somebody looks the other way, give them their therapist, and then the therapist is somewhere pinching the child or hurting the child. But if you, the teacher, the primary custodian of the learning of that child is involved and you're asking questions, such things will not happen. So I want to beg those of us that are educators to begin to look at these things to be able to better support children with special educational needs.
Thank you so very much for that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I can easily reckon with the point when you said that some educators, when it comes to teaching those children, maybe they have some some certain textbooks in the class. They just avoid, using those books with such children. It's really painful. I have had to intervene in such matters as a school leader as well, where some teachers feel this child is not able to attempt this textbook, and the parents they've paid for those books and they are never used. It's not usually a friendly situation, and parents always frown at that. So as teachers, we should be very mindful, be very empathetic. We should go the extra mile, to ensure that we reach out to these children. There should be an individualized educational plan for these children, like you mentioned already, so they don't have to do all what others are doing. Thank you very much. And this brings me to the question of inclusive learning in schools. What will be your advice to schools, who are yet to adopt this inclusive learning system? We still have some schools who will say, we don't want special needs children in our school. We can't handle them. So what will be your advice to such schools in few words? Thank you.
Okay, I will just say get on board. Get on board, because like I said, we don't plan to have them sometimes. We just discover they're in the midst of us, right? And because a child suddenly gets diagnosed does not mean you should just shove the child off. That's not being responsible, and it's not acceptable even by the law. But having said that, I think schools should have policies in place, first and foremost, for how to identify these children, so that even if you feel as a school you don't have the capacity, you can do a referral on time. That's also being inclusive, ensuring that you take up that responsibility and allow, engage with parents on time so that the child gets care on time. So that's the first thing. So you need to be able to open up your doors, because they will come. The incident rates are flying higher and higher, right? Whether due to lifestyle changes or because of better research and diagnostic processes, but we have more children. There's no school you go to that you wouldn't find. So get on board. And if you feel you don't have capacity, please create a system for identification, regular screening, okay? So that when you identify, you can refer to services. Do not keep any child stagnated in your system. Have a progressive policy in place, I beg of you, so that the children can just progress. It's about the life of that child. It's about achieving life success. They will not always be children forever. So the earlier we identify and we refer them to appropriate services, the better they are able to gain the skills that they need to achieve success in life. So let's be part of their success stories. Let's help them get the services they need.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So get on board. If you are one of those schools shying away or running away from accepting such children, please get on board and let's help them grow and live a comfortable life in our society. Yes, thank you very much. Because whether we like it or not, we'll still have in our space. Yes, it's not peculiar to Nigeria or Africa. It's all over the world. So we need to accept them for who they are. And you never know, like you said, nobody plans to have a special needs child. No parent plans for that. No school plans to have them, but it happens and they come in. So let's get on board and accept them. And that brings me to the last question for today. I don't know if there is any way that these special needs cases, autism, dyslexia, and all of them, could they be prevented? I know at the beginning you gave us instances of what could have happened before childbirth, during delivery, and all of that. But could they be prevented? Are there ways of preventing such cases?
To a large extent, in this day and time, some of those things can be prevented. It begins again from the very beginning. As a woman, as a man, make sure you have proper nutrition, even while you're trying to conceive. Make sure that your body has all the nutrients it needs to make that baby. That's key. And when you're pregnant also, antenatal classes are not just, they're not time wasters, right? There are opportunities for your doctor to check with you, to know what's going on with your developing fetus, to know if there are any risk factors, to know if there's any nutritional gap, right? Is there iodine deficiency? If there's iodine deficiency, it means that child, if you have a child, there's a high possibility the child would have an intellectual disability. So when you go for your antenatal clinic as a parent and as a couple, because now I don't want us to just say mothers, as a couple, whether the man, you have to encourage your wife and take her there, right? So that she gets the care that she needs. Make sure you take all your nutrients, make sure you go for your well checks, and be very informed, be very informed, be an informed pregnant person. So when they tell you, oh, your baby is at risk, please do due diligence. Make sure you go to a proper clinic. Make sure you do your scans as they tell you to do. And if there's a CS, please, by all means, go for the CS. Also know what your rhesus factor is, okay? If there's a rhesus factor incompatibility between spouses, there's every possibility that that child, you might have a child that is predisposed towards having what you call jaundice, okay? And if it's not well managed, that child could also have cerebral palsy. So apart from jaundice also, if there's a rhesus factor incompatibility, there's also the potential for, there's a risk for miscarriage. So you want to be sure that your antenatal care is tight. You want to be sure that your delivery process is tight. You also want to be informed about your history as a family. There's some people that have had difficulties and delays. That puts you at alert so that when you have your child, you do those screens and you get them, if they're at risk, you can get them into support services on time. So basically, you just want to manage your pre-pregnancy years, your pregnancy period, and your antenatal period to ensure that you are healthy. And in terms of delivery, please ensure you access good medical care. We know things are tough and all of that, but please, sometimes the cost of prevention, like they say, is always much more cheaper compared to the cost of management, okay? And if your doctor advises you that, oh, this, please listen to them. And even when you find yourself in a situation where the doctors are not conversant with your needs as a woman and you've been in prolonged labor, please tell them, find out from, engage them. Do you understand? Do not stay and be laboring for 2 days like that and your water has broken, because sometimes you might just be in a health facility where they're not very informed. So take charge, okay? Take responsibility for your delivery process. Read up, have information so that whatever you're going through, they're checking your baby, you're pregnant, they're checking, you're asking questions. How is the baby's breathing? What is going on? Ask questions and act on time to prevent any casualties that will come. And of course, if anything happens, early identification and support is recommended.
Wow.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Such an enlightening session. And this is how far we can go today. I know you have a lot to share with us, but I will say that you can join our WhatsApp group. Mrs. Mabel is on our WhatsApp group and she'll be ready to exchange questions, I believe. So I posted the link to our WhatsApp channel, the Educators and Parents Hangout platform on WhatsApp. So we would love to have you there. And if you have questions concerning this session, we'll be waiting to have your questions and to attend to you. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the session. Thank you so much to our awesome and excellent presenter and special guest tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. And it's going to be bye from Nigeria. You can unmute your mics as we end the session right now. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. I would like to hear your voices. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah,
That's
bye.
a pleasure.
Thank you for joining. Thank you. I see you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Bye. Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. See you next month. Thank you. Bye.